My name is Heather, and this is my story. I was born in 1973, the same year that Roe versus Wade was legalized. That is abortion as we know it in our nation. I grew up in two different homes. I was with my mother the majority of my childhood. My mother had experienced a lot of difficulties in her life, and she had a hard time taking care of me, but later became just a very strong prayer warrior for me. And I spent most of my weekends at my dad's house, the rock of my life. Just the most beautiful and selfless man I've ever met. I love my parents, and I thank them every day for giving me life. I experienced about 2 years of just kind of having a normal childhood when I moved in with my father from 12 to 14. I just kind of got to relax and just be a kid. That was short-lived. Because some of the things that you endure and that are just functional to you, you grow up not liking them, but then they become easy roads for you to go down. So I found myself drinking at the age of 14 and having sex for the first time at almost 15. I did my first drug at the age of 15. And my high school years were just intertwined with very amazing times and some very hard times as well. I had opened up a door and went down a road that was going to lead me into darkness, and I was just at the beginning of that and didn't realize that the choices that I made then would pave the road for me as I got older. I met a man when I was 18, and I got married 6 months later. There wasn't anything that I thought that I would do, but I fell in love. We married, and I moved to his hometown, and then a year and a half later we were separated. That broke my heart. I did not seek the right ways of healing. I started to drink and just stayed kind of in denial of what had happened. I was heartbroken and just thought that, he would come back to get me, that he would come back to rescue me. So we had no contact for at all after that one phone conversation that said that we would not get back together. And we later divorced by mail 5 years later and did not talk to each other after that. So I tried to find comfort in relationships. I tried to find so much comfort in alcohol, and I wasn't finding any of that. So I became pregnant a year and a half after I was separated from my husband. The father of the baby and I were not seeing each other at that time that I found out that I was pregnant, and I felt alone. I didn't know where to go. I just thought, I'm an alcoholic and a drug user. How am I going to take care of a baby? And I really didn't want to hurt anyone. I was already hurting so much myself. I didn't want to hurt anyone. So with just one phone call, I just got the phone book out and I opened it up. And I looked up abortion, and I called the very first place that I saw in that phone book, and that was an abortion clinic in Memphis. A week and a half later, I had an appointment. I arrived at the clinic, and it didn't look anything like I thought it was going to look like. I thought it was going to be just some doctor's office. It was very dark, and it was very dreary, and it was just an older home in the historical district. And when I arrived, I was in the foyer area, filling out paperwork, and just kind of felt it just, like any regular doctor's appointment. And then I saw the front door that I was sitting by, and I wanted to run out it, but it was all just a bad dream. It was like I was disconnected from myself. So this song kept playing in my mind the whole time I was sitting there, and it was just a popular song by Tim McGraw then called "Don't Take the Girl." And I knew in my heart that she was a girl. I knew I was carrying a girl. And I just couldn't make it out that door to leave. I went back into the huge kitchen area, which was where I got my blood work done for that day. And when I walked back there, that room was filled with about 20 women. So I was no longer just in this private setting. I was in a large group of women. I passed out during my blood work, which was another sign to run. And they let me recover and kind of rest for a few minutes. And then I went to another room, which was the counseling room. I watched a video by myself of what my abortion procedure would be like. And it was nothing, there was no truth in that video. The lady that was getting the procedure, she just laughed like it tickled, and just like it was no big deal. And then I would be able to go about my life like nothing ever happened. And really my life wasn't very good to begin with. So I asked one question when I was able to see the counselor. Would I be able to have more children if I aborted my child that day? And she said, I really don't see any reason why, but I can't give you any guarantees. So by Tennessee's law at that time, I would have to sit and wait a few hours before I could actually have my procedure done. And I don't really even remember much about that time except for watching a big staircase and all of these ladies coming down that staircase. And they just looked like every bit of life had been taken from them. Their faces just looked lifeless. And I started to see more women come in that building, and I realized that we were just coming in and out of there in groups of 20. It was my time to go up that staircase, and I felt like I was going to my own death. I got to the top of the staircase and I went inside a room to my right, and then there were the nurses and doctors. And the very first thing that caught my eye was a machine that I had never seen before, but I knew was the vacuum aspirator machine that would be used in my abortion procedure. I really felt the whole time that I was there that somebody was going to come in and save me, and that I was not going to have to go through this. I waited for that to the very last minute, that somebody was going to come in and rescue me. I laid on the table, and the nurses beside me seemed to be comforting and warm at first, but then they became very cold and kind of threw my hand back. I used some laughing gas, but I could barely keep that mask on my face because I was in so much pain. I screamed, and the doctor got up and he yelled at me and said, I am not going to have you upsetting these other patients. If you can't be quiet, I will send you to the emergency room. And everything became cruel and dark, and I knew I was all by myself. I wanted to say stop, but I didn't know if it was too late. I didn't know if my baby would be okay. And so I laid there and endured the worst pain I've ever felt in my whole entire life. When he finished, it was time for me to get up, and I just lifelessly slid off of that table because I then knew the truth that they had not given me and that the enemy had not given me. I had just taken the life of my child, and I knew that my life would never ever be the same. I then was escorted to a recovery room where I had to put on some dressing, and the first thing that I did when I went in was just hit my knees, and I cried out to God and said, I'm so sorry for what I've done, and I know that I'll never have anything good in life, that I don't deserve anything good for what I've just done. And I then took a life sentence upon myself for taking the life of my daughter. And I just said, God, you just take me out of the world whenever you're ready. Just let me live out my meaningless life until it's time to go. I was taken into a recovery room, and I laid beside so many other women, and it reminded me of old war movies where wounded, people are, men and women are laid on these beds, and they're just left there, and they're hurting, and there's in so much pain. And I know that for all of myself and the ladies that were there, our life would never ever be the same. And I tried so hard to not hear those sounds and drowned out the memory of that. And I vowed that I would not remember a moment of what happened to me, and that I would go home and forget all about it and never ever talk about it again. And when I did get home, I had to go to the emergency room the next day because I experienced quite a bit of bleeding with my procedure. And my life did not go on as it had never happened. I could not drink enough alcohol. I started using heavier drugs. I started taking pills, and I started using cocaine. And my relationships became very abusive and very dark. And I really just didn't care what happened to me. My life didn't mean anything to me because I had taken a life. I continued that path for 10 years. I traveled a lot. I wanted to be anywhere I could get away from myself. And along that road, I met another man, and we had gotten into a relationship, and we moved to Florida. And then 3 months into our relationship, I went to the doctor, and I found out that I was pregnant again. And my reaction to being pregnant was so much different than the first time that I was told that I was pregnant. My reaction was so much different than the first time that I found out that I was pregnant. I wasn't scared. My reaction was I began to pray, and I just began to ask God, why would you give me a second chance at being a mom? Didn't you remember what I did? And I just continued to seek the Lord in prayer, and I started to feel His hand on my life, and I started to feel Him leading and guiding me in the right way. And I had to make hard decisions, but I knew that if we could just get in that narrow path, that God was there and He was going to lead us through everything. He gave me the name Grace for my daughter, and I just thought, well, that's graceful and pretty, and okay, that sounds like a great name. But I had no idea what that meant. I had no idea what God's grace was all about. And February 17th, 2004, my Grace was born. And when I saw her face, I knew that God loved me, and I knew that He had given me a second chance. And I'm so thankful that He gave me the strength to choose life, because that precious baby has changed my life. She is 11 years old. When she was 4 months old, I gave my heart to Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, and I can't believe what our life looks like today. He took alcohol and drugs and everything, all that bad stuff away, and He gave me the gift of being a mom. And she saved me. He saved me, and she saved me. And I just thank God for life and for that precious baby.